Hi, I'm Cat Wildman and welcome to the Powered by Diversity podcast. Today we're joined by Amit and we're talking all about storytelling. As you might know, at Powered by Diversity, we're quite big on storytelling, and in fact, we have a cultural calendar of events with storytelling woven through each and every one. So this is a topic close to our hearts. Amit's story is one to hear. The things he went through that led him to changing careers and focusing on parents in the workplace and specifically on storytelling. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Amit. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with a quick intro then? So do you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Amit Kalley. I'm the founder of a company called For Working Parents, and I basically do a lot of storytelling. I believe in the power of storytelling, and I share my story in the workplace to create a culture of compassion, a culture of empathy, a more human centric workplace, and a culture where ultimately vulnerability can be celebrated instead of criticized. And I do a lot of work in supporting parents and helping them thrive in the workplace, basically.
Amazing. Thank you for the work you do, first of all. So you've got a heck of a story in terms of your journey to starting your business. So why don't we start with that then? What drove you to start your business?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I spent 10 years working in education. So I used to, I was a teacher and then became a head of sixth form, an assistant head teacher, a deputy head teacher. And then I guess COVID hit, and we had our daughter, who I'm sure we'll talk about. And just a number of factors just led me to, when I was thinking about applying for headships, I just thought, actually, you know what, I sort of want to do something for myself. I want to still have an impact and still make a difference, but almost do it on my terms. And so I decided, without a plan, and I'm sure we'll talk about why that is later as well, but without a plan, to leave education, leave my job, and sort of slowly wound up. I didn't sort of set this up straight away. I slowly wound up into sort of setting up for working parents, because I could just see how much parents were struggling, and I could see that actually people that look like me, there weren't enough people that look like me being open enough to share their story, partly because of maybe shame, embarrassment, partly because we're just not getting a platform. And I thought that I wanted to try to change that. And so I share my story to whoever will listen to it, basically.
Brilliant. Do you know what? We go really big on storytelling. We found that makes the biggest impact. You can tell
Yeah.
people, you can train people. When it's hearing someone's story, it actually gets people in the heartstrings and makes them want to just stand up and go and change the world so that that never has to happen to anyone again. I just think stats are so clinical, but storytelling is obviously, it works for you. So tell us then, tell us what it was that, so you're working in education and there were a few things that led you to think, do you know what, this is not set up for working parents, it's not set up for me. What was your story?
Well, I think COVID had a big impact on that, actually, because I just felt that, and part of it was probably jealousy, because my wife is an accountant, and she was able to work from home and she had all this flexibility. And I just thought that if that's the way the world is going to go, I don't see education going in that way, and I don't particularly want to have to. I had a young daughter at that time. Do I want to be getting up every day and traveling into work? And I think lots of fact I just stopped enjoying it. And I think when you're in education, if you don't care about the kids enough, you're in the wrong job. And I just felt that the passion that I had in making a difference for young people wasn't there in the same way that perhaps it was there earlier. So I had to be true to myself. So that was definitely a massive factor. But my story, I think, plays into a lot of why I decided to sort of go out on my own. And really, my story starts not necessarily from when I was born or from when I was young, but I was born in East London in a working class family. My parents are Tanzanian Indian immigrants. And so a pretty standard immigrant working class upbringing in the East End of London. But actually, the story really started when my mum was diagnosed with cancer. And she was diagnosed with cancer back in 2016. And it was ovarian cancer that she was diagnosed with. And I remember, when she was diagnosed, and I still remember actually part of what I do in the storytelling is share this little nugget of when she was having all these tests done to check whether it was cancer or not. And I remember the day that she was going to find out if she had cancer or not. I was coming home from work. I was working at a school in Northwest London at the time. And I phoned her and I said, what did they say? Because, of course, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I want to know. And she said to me, we'll speak when you get home. And immediately, you have your own relationship with your loved ones. You know what what they mean when they say certain things. I immediately knew what that meant. And I spent the whole journey, the next half an hour, really prepping myself, okay, don't worry, it's going to be bad news, but we're going to sort of get through it. I've got to be strong. I think I was being a bit probably misogynistic at the time. I'm a man, I've got to be strong, and all of these kinds of things. And I got in, and I remember sort of she was standing on the other side of the dining table, and I said to her, what did they say? And she said, I've got cancer. And all of that prep that I did in the car was completely wasted, because when I heard that word, I lost it. And when I say lost it, I mean I was blubbering like a baby. I didn't know how to process this poor little vulnerable woman was now facing the biggest battle of her life. And she came round the dining table. She gave me a hug, I remember, and she said to me, don't worry, I'm still going to be here for you. And I just, even when I'm talking about it now, those words are so telling, because she was staring her own mortality in the face, but actually she wasn't concerned about herself. She was concerned about me, her son, her only child, that she was still going to be here for me. I mean, I was 27 at the time. And I remember that journey, her cancer journey, was really the sort of start of my story, if you will, because she went through a couple of years of chemotherapy. She had major debulking surgery at Royal London. She had chemotherapy at Barts. All of that's great. She had all the side effects you would expect with chemotherapy. She lost her hair, which for anybody is bad enough, but I think for a woman is particularly troubling. She lost weight. She was depressed. She became isolated. And it was a really sort of challenging time. And at the same time, I had started seeing my now wife. And for an Indian mum, I guess the one thing that she wants to see is her son get happily married and sort of go off and start his family and whatever. And I remember we were trying to plan the wedding. My wife's from Tanzania, and her parents, as is customary in our culture, wanted to have the wedding out in Tanzania. My mum wouldn't have been able to travel. There was no way I was going to allow a wedding that my mother wasn't at. And so there was some debate about where to have the wedding. And in the end, I mean, towards the end of 2017, she was quite ill, my mum. And the signs were not looking very good. And my wife and I were going to get married in the summer of 2018. We agreed the wedding was going to be here. My mum had been involved in lots of the planning. She'd helped choose the decor and all of these things. But we realized that there's a chance that she might not actually make the wedding. And so what we did, I remember we booked the local town hall, Redbridge Town Hall, which had a capacity of 40. Now, if you've ever been to an Indian wedding before, you'll know that 40 doesn't even cover the sort of top table. And so what we did was we said immediate family, and we were going to take my mum, and she was going to just see her son get married. So whatever happened after that, she would at least have the happiness of seeing her son get married. It was a really big deal for her. And I remember we booked that for the 6th of January, which was Saturday. 6th of January, we'd booked the town hall for my wife and I to get married in a sort of small civil ceremony. And yeah, my mum, she died on the morning of the 5th. So she died the day before. She died at home. She was very unwell. Even if we'd had the wedding, she would have been there in body, but everything else had already gone by then. And so that really sort of, I think my grief journey had started before that, because I knew what the inevitable here was going to be. I think my father and other people perhaps were still holding on to any kind of hope, but I knew what the inevitable was going to be. And so my wife and I got married as planned in the summer. It was a big wedding, but it was also a big tribute to my mum. So it was really sort of bittersweet. We had lots of things about my mum at the wedding, but at the same time, lots of sort of celebrations. And that was the sort of first part of the story, really, that got me really thinking about what it is that I want to do and why it is that I want to do it.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I can't believe she didn't make it. I can't believe she didn't make it. Oh, bless her. Oh, that must have been really hard. I mean, how much flexibility did you get, and how much were you thinking at that time? Like, I want to be there for her. I want to go to her appointments. I want to be there when she gets back. I want to look after her. I want to go to the scans and whatnot. And how much flexibility did you want, and how much did you guess at the time?
I was pretty lucky, actually. Although I was in a school, and obviously, if you're not there, you're not teaching your lessons, or you're involved in your leadership or whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, I was pretty lucky that appointments that I felt that I wanted to attend. I mean, I didn't attend all of them. My dad was attending the majority. I didn't attend all of them. And towards the end of my mum's life, her sister from Coventry had actually decided to basically move in with us and was sort of managing everything. I mean, my dad and I were, I guess, pretty incapable, I guess, at the time, simply because of emotions of managing everything. And her sister my aunt just sort of took that all on, not because she wasn't suffering. Of course she was suffering. This was her younger sister she was about to lose, but she managed that, and that made life a bit easier for us. And work was pretty flexible. But what I used to do was I used to work in Hendon, so I used to drive from Hendon down to St Bart's every evening after work, spend a couple of hours with her because she spent quite a bit of time at St Bart's, and then come home. Bring her sister, my aunt, home, who'd been there all day. And so we sort of had a bit of a system going. And then when my mum was at home, it was obviously a bit easier because I was just coming home, and my mum was there anyway. I think I was lucky in the sense that my school at the time was very compassionate, and people that I worked for were very compassionate. But it still got me on that journey of recognizing and realizing that all of us have stories that some of us are just too scared to share at work. People who log off early, we label them as lazy, or we label them as, skivers or whatever. We have no idea unless we create a space for them to tell us, and a space for them to feel safe to tell us. We have no idea what they're going home to. So, when we make judgments about somebody logging off at 3 o'clock, they might log back on at 7. We don't know. And we're in this whole kind of, there is a part of the world that is going anti-DEI, and, it's this idea of anti-flexibility. But, we've seen so much. Mental health and well-being has improved so much in people that have that flexibility, and organizations that allow flexibility really are thriving. And yeah, I just think if we allow people to share their story, if we create a space where people feel safe sharing their story, and where vulnerability is not something that we judge as a weakness, then we're going to have a much stronger workforce, a much more committed workforce, a much more productive workforce. And all of us have stories. And that's just one part of my story. I haven't even got on to the other parts yet. That's just the sort of act one, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing though. Life happens, doesn't it? Like you can't hire someone and then not expect life to happen. People get sick, people have kids, people's relatives get sick, as we've heard. Like this is the thing. Like there's billions of stories, and everybody has one, just as you say. So I had a similar story where my mum got sick and was diagnosed with cancer. Happily, I was on mat leave, so I moved to the family home to take care of her. My dad and my brother, on the point that you were making, their respective workplaces were really, really, really understanding. Even my husband, who he wasn't even blood related to my mum, loved her, but wasn't a blood relative, and they were so flexible and so supportive. The loyalty that they felt afterwards, and the gratitude, and the wow, they really had my back when the chips were down. They would never have left. They would never have left those companies. My dad ended up retiring, but he retired happy and grateful. And it's just that the flexibility when you need it is so important, isn't it? And it engenders so much love and trust and pride in the company from employees, just as you say. So then you became a parent not long afterwards. And were you still working at the time? You're still working in education at the time?
I was still in education at the time. So our daughter, Isha, came in May of 2020. Now, if we remember what the world looked like in May 2020, we were completely locked down. She actually arrived a month early. She was a month premature. Normal delivery. We didn't think anything was wrong. It was actually, dare I say it, it was actually quite nice for us to be locked down, because we just were able to get on with our own little new creation and just enjoy that time with her. But so if you remember, then sort of that summer was the famous Eat Out to Help Out summer, where we were all encouraged to get out and spread COVID and sort of help businesses grow. And we so Isha went for her 8-week jabs, and she was only a tiny baby. She was 5'10" when she was born. She was a month early, and the doctor had just stethoscope just said, look, oh, by the way, she's got a bit of a murmur. I can't jab her now. Just get the murmur checked out, and once you get the all clear, come back and we'll give her her jabs. It doesn't matter if they're a week or two late. So we thought, okay, fine. So we went to our local hospital. Again, all these weird rules in place now. One parent allowed in, one parent waits outside, and had a few checks done. And then suddenly we're being told that she's being transferred to Great Ormond Street. And so there's a catch-22 here, because if a child is being transferred to Great Ormond Street, you know that your child is in the best care in the world. Great Ormond Street is known for its fantastic care of children. But on the other hand, if your child is being admitted to Great Ormond Street, there must be something seriously wrong. Otherwise, it would have been dealt with at the local hospital. So we basically found out that she was born with 3 holes in her heart, 3 different holes in her heart. And it wasn't picked up in the scans. It wasn't picked up at birth. It was just picked up by this GP who had just noticed a murmur. And so she was being breastfed, and she wasn't able to keep the milk in. She was sick all the time. She wasn't gaining weight. And we were told that she was actually burning more calories by suckling on the breast than she was gaining. And so we were given high-calorie milk, prescribed high-calorie milk, and she was fed through a tube, through her nose, and she was booked to have open heart surgery. She needed to have open heart surgery to repair those holes. And again, we're sort of in this COVID year. This is 2020. And then on Christmas Day 2020, this was the time now where there is talk of another big lockdown coming. But you were allowed to bubble. And so we bubbled with my uncle's family, and we were having Christmas together with my uncle. And, Isha was pretty unwell, more unwell than usual, and being more sick than usual. And you just sort of used your parental instinct at the time. And I said to my wife, I said, look, it might be worth going to A&E. And again, the 2 of us couldn't go. And it caused a bit of stress, actually, in our relationship, because, my wife was the one who was always going into the hospitals. I mean, Great Ormond Street, she saw the inside of that hospital in 2020 dozens of times. I didn't see it once. So what used to happen was she would go in, do all of the heavy lifting in terms of medical jargon and listen to all the questions. I would try to dial in, but there's no network. I would walk around London, gain miles, and just, frantically sort of think about the worst. And we would argue about, did you ask this question? No, I didn't know to ask that question. Why didn't you ask it? Well, you weren't there. It put a lot of strain on us. So again, on that Christmas, my wife took her to A&E, and she was again taken to Great Ormond Street. Nothing to do with her heart, but she was diagnosed with diaphragmatic hernia. And her bowel, basically, part of her bowel had gone up through a hole in the hernia and was pressing up against her lungs. So she had to have emergency keyhole surgery on Boxing Day for that. And again, it wasn't picked up in any kind of scans or any sort of work. By this time, by the way, open heart surgery had already been cancelled twice, including once when my wife had been dressed up in the blue robes, ready for surgery. They cancelled it because an emergency had come in. And as hard as that was for us, I guess perspective was important. It kept us going, because if an emergency had come in, those parents and that child were much more in need than we were and our daughter was. So she had to have diaphragmatic hernia surgery on Boxing Day 2020. And then we went into lockdown, if you remember. I think the first day back at school, I think everybody went back to school for 1 day, and then we locked down again. And finally, her open heart surgery was booked for February. So she was 10 months old now, I think. And my wife and I just took the risk. We booked an apartment near Great Ormond Street. We're not a million miles away from it, but we booked an apartment there. We wanted to be on the doorstep for a couple of nights. And she did have her open heart surgery. It was a 9-hour surgery. And the doctor said, if we don't call you, don't worry. And what they were basically implying were, if we call you, something's gone wrong. So we were hoping and praying our phone wouldn't ring. Of course, we walked around London. It was chilly and cold. Nothing was open. We're just wandering around, praying our phone doesn't ring, trying to keep busy, go back to the apartment, have some lunch, go out again. And then the only time I got to go into Great Ormond Street was when my daughter had come out of surgery and was in intensive care. And it was, arguably the worst time for me to see her, because she was connected to dozens of tubes, gaping wound down her chest, blood everywhere, and a little baby, helpless, little baby connected to all these tubes. But it was a long old process. But thankfully, if we're looking back now, my wife and I sometimes laugh about how we got through it. My mother wasn't alive. My wife's parents live in Tanzania. We were locked down. We were on our own. Family were supporting through messages. But other than that, there was nothing anybody could do. She's now, like most girls, 4 years old, going on 14 years old. She's been joined by 2 brothers. So, she's still going to be a heart patient. They fixed 2 holes in that surgery. She still has 1 remaining. She's still under Great Ormond Street's care. They're going to keep monitoring that. So Yeah, I mean, I guess that story has a much happier ending than the story about my mum does.
Oh, wow. I mean, you have been through it. Your relationship has really been tested, but you must be so strong now as a couple. I mean, that is amazing.
We do sometimes sit back and look on our story, and we literally we just laugh. We just think we don't know how we got through it, but I think every day was we had no choice. What choice do you have? I mean, I've lost my mum. I have no choice. There's nothing that I can do. Of course, I was grieving. Of course, I spent days crying. I mean, Isha's middle name is actually my mum's name. We gave her my mum's name as her middle name as a sort of a tribute to her. And she was, she was a blessing for us. We had no choice, but she was an innocent baby. If we weren't there for her, who was going to be there for her? It wasn't. She
Oh,
didn't do it
totally.
wrong.
Oh,
Uh,
that the unbelievable barrels of strength that you open up as a parent when you're just like, "Oh, I can't go on. Oh my gosh, another barrel has been delivered. Here I am showing up. Oh, wow. What a story. And congratulations on the boys as well. Very excited. One of them is really, really new, isn't he?
One of them is 3 months old at the time.
Oh, so
Yeah.
sweet. How lovely. Wow. So that is a heck of a journey. And so at what point did you have did you have a moment where you're like, my purpose is going to be doing this business? And what was that?
I think it was when my daughter was ill. So I quit my job in April 22, actually. So she had her surgery in February 21. I had changed jobs. I became a deputy head teacher at another school, and I thought maybe a change of career, a change of environment would get me going again. It did for a little while, but then those same doubts crept in, and I just thought, actually, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And spoke to my wife. She could see the impact it was having on my mental health and my well-being. She encouraged me to sort of quit, and it only transpires more recently. I'd always suspected that I had ADHD because I worked with so many children that had ADHD, and I recognized all the symptoms in me. And I would tell people when I had to walk out of meetings or I had to fidget. I'm sitting here now playing with a pen. I had to, and blue tack in the other hand. So when I had to do, and people would think that I was lying. People would think that I was trying to justify my behavior on ADHD, which they didn't believe that I had. So I just felt that actually, you know what, I want to go through the process. There's not many people in my culture that are sort of open about having any kind of neurodiverse diagnosis. It's still a big taboo. And I just thought if I have it, which I was confident that I did have it, I would do everything that I can to talk about it. And if I don't have it, I need to find out what I do have because something isn't quite right. In the end, of course, when I went through the diagnosis process, every single box was ticked. I mean, the psychiatrist that I saw was, you're an absolute 100% case study of ADHD. And I just, I mean, I'm in a big battle even now. This was a year ago. I'm in a big battle now about medication and about the GP taking on my care. But that's a whole nother story. But again, there's not many people that look like me that are talking about having ADHD as an adult and the impact that it has and the awareness that I'm trying to raise on that. So all of these things, all of this story of mine, it's all part of my commitment to encourage others to share their own story, whether it's grief related, whether it's a disability, or whether it's race related, whatever it might be. We all have a story, and it's not for us. I sometimes think, my mum was 56 when she died. It was, a day before my planned wedding, 4 days before what would have been my 30th birthday at the time. But I know so many people have had it worse than I did. At least I got 29 years of my mum. Other people have had it worse. There's no competition in grief, or there's no competition in how we navigate challenges. Our daughter was seriously unwell, but she survived. Other parents have lost children. So, when we start getting into this, whose grief is worse or whose story is worse, we get into a very dangerous territory. This is what I try to do is share my story to show that people that look like me can have vulnerabilities and speak about them proudly, despite them being huge taboos. A, I'm a man. B, I'm a man of color. C, I'm a man that visibly looks different. I'm a Sikh that wears a turban. And there's not many people out there who look like me sharing their story. And then the follow-up to that is all around how do we create a workplace environment that is supportive of its parents, of its carers, of its employees in general, so that, like you said about, your husband and your dad, and you want to work for companies that give you that flexibility and show you compassion.
Totally, totally. So that's what you've been doing. So how do organizations create that environment. What do you do with organizations to help them on that journey?
Yeah, so the main thing that I really, really focus on is the storytelling piece. I love going into workplaces. I do a bit of work with schools actually as well, given my kind of connection to schools. So I love going into workplaces and having that opportunity to share my story, having the stage or whatever it might be to share my story. Because I think when people see it, when people hear it, it's then when they feel empowered. And then we normally follow that up with some kind of sometimes workplaces go for some internal storytelling training. It's how do we train willing volunteers to feel confident in sharing their own story? Small sort of things around body language, voice, and projection, and how do I get my story across effectively? And then what I've done with a few companies is we've run some storytelling mornings or storytelling afternoons where people take the stage and just have 15 minutes of sharing their story. And the beauty for me is when I see other people's faces thinking, gosh, I had no idea. I had somebody say to me, I've worked with this person for 8 years and I had no idea she was a carer for a dying relative. And you think, why would you have an idea if you maybe never asked, and B, maybe that person never felt comfortable telling you. Maybe the workplace didn't create a space where sharing those vulnerabilities were appropriate. And so now suddenly you see these people feeling inspired by potentially my story and then sharing their own story and then sharing that story with others. It's magical to see the impact that something so small can have on people.
Oh, I absolutely love storytelling. It's my favorite. And I just think it's such an undervalued method of just humanizing everyone, just getting that bond going where you're just like, oh my gosh, I never knew. But on the same vein, this is why I love your idea so much, is that it's not easy to get the confidence up to tell your story, is it? So that's a really interesting. So you do storytelling workshops at organizations. What sort of impacts have you seen then, apart from, just like in the moment, people having a lovely reaction to each other's stories? What impacts have workplaces seen from the work that you do with them?
Yeah, so I've had some feedback actually from people that have sort of booked me to work with them to talk about the kind of, it's a lot of it is anecdotal. It's not necessarily data driven, but it's the environment, the culture is somehow changed, and where there were elements of toxicity maybe, that's changed, and people now are actually getting on with each other, and we're now more understanding of somebody that needs to log off early but is happy to log on a bit later. Maybe they've got children that they need to take care of and they can get their work done at 9 p.m. when it's more convenient for them. So it's just understanding the flexibility that some people need. I have had workplaces ask, what do they do when, a parent wants flexibility for their children, but a non-parent who doesn't need that flexibility wants flexibility to go to Glastonbury. What do we do then? And it's a really interesting question, because the way I say it's not about equality, it's about equity, and it's about finding what's equitable for everybody. Because of course you're going to have non-parents and people whose stories maybe haven't been written yet and don't have much of a story to share. It's still finding ways to be equitable for them. So where you're giving flexibility for parents that need it, making sure that you're finding ways to be flexible for people that need it in other ways, whether it's disability related, or whether it's people who you've got this big group of people now, and I guess one of the key things about DEI is not to isolate groups. And my biggest worry is that kind of, heterosexual, cis, white men sometimes feel that they're not included in this dialogue, or white women are not included in this dialogue because they're always getting hammered with this, you've got white privilege, and you don't know what it feels like to be a minority. And yeah, elements of that might be true, but at the same time, we're not trying to push people away. We want to bring people together. So we want heterosexual middle-aged white men to share their story, because their story matters too, and their story can have an impact on people that look like them or people that resonate with them. So it's all about respecting each other's experiences and intersectionality and how important that is.
Brilliant. I love it. Storytelling is the big equalizer. I'm into it. I'm really into it. I'm like, like, as I said before we started, storytelling is one of the most impactful things that we do in EDI. Okay, well, let's leave people with two things. The first thing is, what one thing, if an organization is going to do one thing for their working parents, what would you recommend?
I mean, it sounds really obvious, but there are still so many workplaces not doing this. Is it's provide them that flexibility that they need to be able to thrive. Because, if you tell them they have to work in a set way, you're probably going to lose them. So you end up losing good talent. We all know what it comes down to in terms of recruitment costs and training costs of new staff. Allow them that flexibility. Allow them to work at times that are convenient for them. Allow them to go to their child's nativity play if it's in the middle of the day. Goodness me, don't let them miss, because it's not them that's going to suffer, it's their children that are going to suffer. Their children are going to remember that everybody else's parents turned up to my nativity play and I looked around the audience and you were never there. And your defense is going to be because my work didn't let me. And their answer to that is going to be, I don't care about what your work let you do or not. Why didn't you leave? Because children don't tend to understand those kinds of things, right? So it might sound really simple, but give that flexibility, be understanding, be compassionate, be a human-driven workplace that respects and values the diverse needs, because you'll get that loyalty in return. You'll get people thriving in return.
Definitely. I can't emphasize that. I think you and I talked about it in your podcast when I started my first job as a director. I had 2 kids at the time, and my boss said to me on my very first day, he was like, I never want you to miss a sports day, school play, an opening of an envelope for your kid's school. I want you to be there for every single one. You walk out of here proudly and go to all of those things. Never, ever feel like work comes first. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. The fact that you were so emphatic about it, I was like, oh, it just made me relax because I was so stressed. And I said to my husband, my first day, do not call me. Do not call me with any child-related stuff. I want to put on a good show. And that just put me so at ease and made me love that job so much more. So that is great advice. It's the little things, isn't it, with parents? So the final thing is, how can people get in touch with you when they want a bit more of Amit, they want a storytelling workshop, they just want to chat to you? How can they do that?
Yes, absolutely. So they can connect with me on LinkedIn at Amit Kalley, follow on Instagram at For Working Parents, visit our website, forworkingparents.com, email me, amit@forworkingparents.com. Lots of ways to get in touch. I want to work with as many organizations, big and small, as possible. I'm not precious about what organizations can afford. I'm not going for the kind of Googles only. It's, this applies to all organizations, no matter what your size, no matter what your budget. So yeah, get in touch and would love to have a conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Amit. This has been wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find us on socials at PB Diversity and at Powered by Diversity on LinkedIn. And as always, please get in touch, cat@poweredbydiversity.org, for all your equity, diversity and inclusion needs, and with questions you'd like to hear answered on future episodes.